Hey guys, before we get into the video, I want to shout Civivi Knives out. And I'm not doing that because they've sponsored some of my videos. I'm doing that because they make such a good quality tool. If you're somebody who wants an actual tool, an actual knife to carry around and use for EDC or for work or for anything like that, check out Civivi. They do an incredible job. Not only is their fit, their finish, their action, everything dialed in. Their price points are really good. They're very competitive, but the most important thing, their geometry. Their geometry is done extremely well, and we all know geometry cuts. They do great heat treats, and it's a great quality tool for the user, for the knife user, the person that actually wants to bring their knife out in the field and use it. And they have a knife out there for everybody. They have so many knives. So if you haven't checked out Civivi yet, you should. Bang! Neeves Knives, I'm Jared, and today we have the Civivi Imperium review. Now, I have two examples. They also come in a micarta version and a Damascus. I think it's micarta and Damascus, but they come in multiple different options. So, yeah. The Jade Green G10 here can be writ dyed to any color you prefer or would like. And the shred carbon fiber, in this case, has the gold specs. There's also a couple different options like this or with the shred carbon fiber. Beautifully well done. Very smooth. Now, the steel on this one is Nitro V, and we will get into the sharpening of the Nitro V and what I think about it later on in the video. But first up, let's get to the action, because the action on this knife is very, very well tuned. The lock bar access is very easy to get to, and the thumb studs are placed in a perfect spot, whether you like to reverse flick or thumb flick. So the action is not only incredibly easy, but it's very satisfying because the thumb studs are very well placed, but they're also well textured. So it grips your thumb very, very well. And like I said, the reverse flick is also incredibly easy. Now, with the access to the lock bar, nice cutout, very easy to get to. And it is incredibly smooth on the drop. Let's check out the G10 version because I think you can see the liner a little bit better. The lockup is very solid. And I've checked it and double checked it. It's very solid in all directions. But the access to the lock bar is really nice. And it is very smooth. Both of them are extremely similar with their action. Now, the front flipping action, the jimping is done perfectly. It goes up and around the front flipper, which is what I like to see. I don't like to see it when it cuts off like at the top and then they leave the top smooth. Nope, this one is very grippy all the way up to the peak. So whether you like to go right from the front like that, or if you're kind of like me where you got go from the top like that, that's to me that I personally like to do that a little bit better. I just find that the grip right here on the top in this direction just works out really good. And since it's so well tuned, I can personally grip it like this, reach around and flip it like that. So there's lots of ways to fidget with this knife. It is very satisfying. Like I said, the drop is incredibly smooth. It's not a fall shut action, but with a little influence, it will just fall right shut. But with no influence, it is a couple little shakes. Very well centered and, like I said, very solid. Now the ergos. It is thin and sleek. So either one. Now the G10 version is going to be grippier because it does add texturing and the scales are flat. In the carbon fiber, it's contoured, as you can see. So it's more rounded. Now I'm guessing the micarta version is similar to this one, where it's more flat. Now, either one is very comfortable. This one is going to be a bit grippier. So if you're wanting to do extensive cutting, especially through dense materials, you might prefer the texture a bit more. But either one is very, very comfortable. I do feel the clip. It is a deep carry clip, which with most deep carry clips you do feel, especially with a knife that's very sleek in design like this, but it's still, you know, pretty comfortable. And I do have a little spot that I can choke up if I really want to. I use this spot for push cuts where I just grip it around like that so I can get maximum amount of leverage with the pressure distributed across this straight part in my palm as I'm pushing. Now, the pinch grips and stuff are very comfortable too for fine tasks if you really want to, you know, drill a hole or whatever you're going to do with your knife. Now, speaking about the cutting, because these knives cut extremely well. They not only passing through materials, but also the leverage you get in the handle winds up working out really, really good. And I enjoy cutting with them. I enjoy carrying it, and the pressure when I'm pushing through materials is distributed across my hand really nicely, whether I'm slicing or push cutting, and it just works really good. And you do have quite a bit of cutting length to, you know, to take advantage of when passing through materials. So you never really have to worry about the blade slipping out or anything like that. And it is very well done with the grind. The grind is nice and thin. The geometry is really good. I measured both of them at about 15 thousandths behind the edge, which is really, really nice because the blade stock isn't thick. So since it has a relatively thin blade stock and a short blade, you know, seeing that it's a short blade, you want a thin blade stock. It doesn't have very far to drop down to a thin edge. So in this case, they did it very well. Now, utility cuts. Utility cuts work great. It is a drop point blade. Now, the point doesn't dramatically drop down. It is more in front or in line with the pivot, kind of like a spear point, but it's actually just a little bit higher. So since it is a little bit higher, you do have to lift up just a little bit to get to the tip, but it's incredibly easy to get to and it works very well. The utility cuts are great. And you do have a nice fine acute tip that works for just about any type of precision cutting or utility cuts that you might do with your knife. The clip works great. I mean, it's not inset, but it does have flat screws. It's also reversible. So in and out of the pocket, it works great. I love the way this thing carries. Now, I will say, though, that the carbon fiber version is not reversible. So if you are left-handed, you might be wanting more of the G10 or micarta version more so than the carbon fiber. So keep that in mind, but the clip works great. And most Civivi clips do work great. In this case, since they do have the flat screws, you don't have anything getting in the way or anything like that. So the carry works fantastically. And it's a joy to carry because of that reason, because you don't have nothing in, like it's thin, it's small, it's light. And I don't mean small as in short. I mean just the size. It's a sleek knife. So even though you are getting a full cutting length and a full grip, it's all in a compact package. Now, if you look inside, you can see it is heavily milled, which brings down the weight quite a bit. Now, the liner is also jimped really nicely. There's jimping on the spine of the blade, which is the front flipper. So since the jimping from the front flipper works so well, it does second as jimping in the hand. Now it is backed up a little bit, and you do have a tiny little ramp right there, and the hardware is T8s, which I love to see. T6s on the clip, but no big deal. The T8s are really good. I like the quality of their hardware. Now, looking at the blade, it has somewhat of like a bead blast finish, kind of like a bead blast stone washed finish. If we look at both of them, so This type of finish, you know, with hard use will show scratches a little bit, but it's not bad. I heavily used this one and you don't really see it too much. I thought in the beginning that I would, but they seem like they just want washing right out. Now, it does have the full steel liners and a hidden lanyard hole back here, or lanyard loop back here. So if you do like lanyards, there you go. And the sharpening choil. The plunge grind starts right here and it ends right here. So they did give you quite a bit of steel to remove, which I'm very happy about. It's one thing I really like that Civivi does usually very well. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, most of their knives, we included, does sharpening choils and plunge grinds. That's the main point. Plunge grinds very well. You know, it doesn't matter if you have this big of a sharpening choil. If the plunge grind starts here and ends right there, it doesn't matter. It looks like you have a sharpening choil, but you don't. The sharpening choil has everything to do with the plunge grind, and in this case it ends about right there, so they did give you quite a bit to remove. Now, going into sharpening, before we go into the bad things, Nitro V. Okay, so I sharpen it on, I have 3 venev diamond stones that are double-sided. So 3 double-sided diamond stones from Venev. They are high-quality stones, and they do an incredible job, especially with super steels. So I sharpened this knife, the carbon fiber version, on them stones, starting with 165 grit / 125 grit. Started sharpening on that. The other side of that stone is a 100 / 80 grit. So once it hit the stone, I could feel the steel felt really good. The heat treat felt really good. It felt like good quality. I was really happy with how the steel felt. You know, I didn't notice the edge being burnt at all or anything like that, but I used it quite a bit. It was due for a sharpening. And it reprofiled very quickly. I did want to lay the edge back just slightly, not much, because it is a thin edge already. So I didn't need to, go crazy or anything, but leaning it back to about 17 degrees was what I wanted, and it sharpened up really good. I went through the progressions of my stones. Everything went very fast, and that's another thing I love about Civivis and Wihas. They sharpen up so fast because they're usually thin behind the edge, because you usually don't have to avoid a choil, because of so many good things. So it's so much easier to maintain your edge when it's done to Wiha and Civivi standards of thin edges, good choils, nice blade shapes, etc. And even grinds. That's another thing, an even grind. So everything went great. I got to my last stone, my finishing stones, and it polished up very, very nicely and came out very, very sharp. It was very sticky. The Nitro V, like I said, seems like it's heat treated pretty good. And I stropped it on my sharpeningsupplies.com. Shout out to them. Definitely get some sharpening supplies from them. I will link them down in the description. I also have a whole bunch of sharpening supplies in the description. I will also link these knives down in the description as well. Now, next thing, after stropping on my DMT diamond spray, 1/2 micron on top of my leather strop from sharpeningsupplies.com, which is an incredible strop, my favorite strop right now. The edge came out great. Very, very sticky, very sharp, enough to cut a paper towel, enough to go through phone book paper, which this isn't phone book paper that I'm going to show you, but it's the same thing, same thickness, same everything. And that paper is very hard to cut cleanly through. I mean, extremely hard. If you have to have a sharp edge to go through that type of paper, it's just too thin. So let's take a look at the edge. The edge came out very, very nice. And I'm very happy with the way it came out. Not only did it polish really good, but it kept a lot of bite in the edge. It's nice and flat, nice and even on both sides. Everything looks really good. And I didn't have to remove a lot of steel because it just went so fast. You know, when you have uneven bevels and everything else, it seems to take a bit more time because you're busy trying to match things up and everything. And when you have a good heat treat on the steel, it sharpens up really quickly. It's when it's soft is when, you know, it seems like it takes forever. Now, let's go on to some bad things. What are some negative things about this knife? Because there's always something negative that I have to say. So, well, before I get to that, I want to say that between the 14C28N steel that they are using on some of their models and this Nitro V, I find that they feel very similar, and which makes sense because it's a similar steel. They're very similar in their makeup. AEBL, Nitro V, 14C28N, 12C27, they're very similar. However, I do think that the 14C, and this is just specifically from, you know, just this is my preference. I tend to like the 14C just a little bit more than the Nitro V. That being said, they're extremely similar. So my love for the 14C could be a completely biased thing, but I felt like the 14C took a little bit keener of an edge than the Nitro V. So that's kind of where I'm leaning. Now, that could be all in my head, but I do feel like it did get a bit stickier from the polish, and I feel like, not that it sharpened up a little bit better, because they both sharpen up incredibly easy, but I think the edge from the 14C was just a little bit stickier. Anyways, it's, you know, neither here nor there. They're both very good quality. So I probably shouldn't have even put that in the review. Now, some of the bad things, and this is going to be biased, but this type of finish I do like a lot. However, I'm not a big fan of bead blast. Now, this has kind of like a bead stonewashed, you know, I don't know how they do it. Maybe it's a vapor blast. I'm not sure. But the bead blast finishes are susceptible to corrosion. Now, Nitro V is very well corrosion resistant, so I'm not worried about corrosion on these knives or anything, but just, you know, I just prefer more of a stone wash, just a plain stone wash, more so than a bead blasted finish, you know, that's similar to a stone wash. But this is kind of in the middle. It's not quite a bead blast, and it's not quite a full stone wash. I'm not sure how they do it or the process, but you know, I think about that because every time I've had corrosion on a knife, it's always been on a bead blast. Now, like I said, I don't think this is a bead blast. I'm just saying, you know, that it seems like it's close to a bead blast. I'm not sure what this finish is. So I prefer more of a stone wash. Like I said, preferences. Next thing. Now, there's no real bad things on this. It's very nice. Now, like I said, being that it is sleek and it is thin, you do feel the clip quite a bit. I do kind of wish it was inset, but it's not that big of a deal because it still works great. I didn't have no issues with my pants going over that little bump right there from the clip, you know, as it's going through. So I just prefer that it's inset, but it works great. Now, this ramp it does go pretty high, like I said, so in the hand, I do feel it quite a bit. You can kind of see where it lands in my hand, and you can see the indent in my hand when I lift it. So, you know, it's not that big of a deal. It's something you kind of know you're going to have to deal with when you're talking about a thinner profiled knife. Next thing, you know, with the carbon fiber, I know that it, you know, wouldn't have looked as good because this is like the best looking part is right here. Not saying that this part looks any worse or anything, but just, you know, you can really see everything right here, and it just looks very beautiful. But it would have been nice for lefties to have a spot for the clip. Like I said, that it kind of would have taken away from the look, so I kind of understand. Next thing is I like that they hit the lanyard. They put the clip primary, lanyard hole secondary, so props to that. Next thing, now this didn't happen. So you guys can tell I'm nitpicking like crazy when I say this. Nitpicking like crazy, okay? So the plunge grind thing, not saying this knife has this issue, but I want to see them in the future pay attention to the plunge grind and make sure that they keep it back as far away from the edge as possible. It starts here, it ends here. You know, if it would have been any closer to the edge, I would be complaining about it. As a sharpener, we don't want to see edges where they're not leaving you anything to sharpen. I don't want to see that. So just, I'm just saying, kind of like this here. I'll pull up a knife really quick. I'll try to keep it upside down so I'm not really, but you see the plunge grind there? You see how it lands right on the edge? That sucks. That is not a sharpening choil. That leaves you nothing. You have nothing to sharpen there. So I want to see good plunge grinds on top of good sharpening choils. Now, another thing is, and this is not really too negative, but with a contoured knife, you are going to have a knife that has the tendency to turn on you in use. Now, if that is an issue with you, like I said, if you're going to be using this knife for dense materials, you're most likely going to want the flatter one. This one has a lot less likely chance of spinning on you or turning in your hand, while this one does. I didn't really have that issue, but it's a common thing with rounded, smooth knives. This is not textured. It is nice and slick. It looks beautiful, though. So all in all, man, I can't really, I'm nitpicking like crazy. It is a great knife, and it's hard to come up with negative things when there really isn't nothing negative to say. So I'm not really trying to come up with something, and I don't want to make it seem like that, so there we go. Incredible knife, incredibly well done. I highly recommend Civivi knives. Civivi does such good work. They seem like they hit all the check marks and all the boxes of what makes a quality tool, and that is what I like about them. It's not necessarily that I'm that it, how can I say it, I don't want to make a company seem better than it is or anything like that. But there's a lot of companies out there that they miss little checkpoints that these guys always take care of, and I like that, especially from a tool aspect, especially from a user's aspect, a knife user. So shout out to Civivi for killing it. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.